to cross over to Washington and speak to Arise correspondent Eric Ham, Arise US correspondent to be absolutely precise. So good to establish communications with you, Eric. The White House sees this meeting with China as crucial for the war in Ukraine. I mean, what's emerged so far, do you know?
Well, Charles, you're right. This meeting tackles a lot of different issues, a lot of different facets right now, because we heard today that Russia has actually sought China's assistance both militarily and economically as a result of the sanctions that have been placed on them. Now, we're also told that these requests for aid actually came after the invasion into Ukraine. We're still awaiting the exact word in terms of what they sought and what was China's response. But we know that today that Jake Sullivan was actually going to be meeting with top officials from the People's Republic of China. And there are a number of reasons for this meeting. The meeting is, of course, to keep the lines of communication open between the United States and China. As we know, both the United States and China are both embroiled in an economic tit for tat. That's been going on since the Trump administration. But in addition to that, the United States wants to, if they want to try to mitigate the impact that China will have on this continued crisis in Ukraine, even though they have pledged their support to China to Russia by abstaining from key votes at the UN Security Council and other venues as well. But we also know that the United States wants to also put as much pressure on China to not provide support to Russia, because again, what the United States is attempting to do is isolate Russia from the rest of the world. We already know that the United States is engaged in talks with both Venezuela and Iran. In fact, it is Russia that is actually putting a kibosh on the JCPOA from being signed because they believe that could lead to more sanctions on Russia. And so clearly what we're seeing here by Jake Sullivan is a continued effort to try to box Russia in. We did get a readout of Jake Sullivan on his pending meeting, but we're still waiting for the details of actually what is to come out of his conversations with those high-level officials with China and Rome today.
Right. And briefly, Eric, I mean, you mentioned there, unsurprisingly, the Chinese have been quiet about Russia asking them for military support. I mean, they did accuse the US of spreading false information, essentially saying the US is trying to stoke provocation. How is that narrative being assessed in Washington?
Again, what we're seeing from the United States is attempting to apply a very deft touch, trying to thread this needle with China, recognizing that China can be a potential problem, but certainly don't want to do anything to provoke China. And so that's why we see this meeting today by the United States National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, to try to maintain those lines of communication with China. If they cannot actually keep them off the sidelines, they don't want them to be as much of a problem, and they do want to try to at least limit their involvement so as to keep Russia further isolated from the rest of the world.
So, Eric, I mean, has this proxy war between the US and China moved to Ukraine? Because, I mean, both sides seem to be snapping at each other's heels over Russia and Ukraine.
That may be true, but also what we are told from our sources inside the White House is that China is acutely aware of how these sanctions are playing out. They have seen this, and they certainly do not want to see this type of economic wrath inflicted upon them if, in fact, they were to attempt to invade Taiwan. And so that is something that is certainly keeping China at bay. Even though China has a large economy, they're still very much dependent on the West for a number of resources. And also it's important to note they export a lot of goods to the West. And also a lot of their economic firepower, a lot of their resources are in international reserves. That is one of the reasons that is certainly keeping China from actually going full on against the United States.
Eric, thanks very much indeed. Eric Ham, Arise US correspondent, talking to me there from Washington.